Thank you. So, as Brian mentioned, my name is Jason Pryor. I am the 3M Cloud Security Architect and the manager of the Cloud Security Engineering team at 3M. A little bit of background, I've been at 3M about 4.5 years. If you know 3M, you know Post-it notes, you know Scotch-Brite, tapes, and adhesives, and abrasives, and about 20 to 30,000 other things that we manufacture. We're in over 190 countries around the world. We have 115,000 plus patents for 3M, and we have about 90,000 employees. We have 26 different divisions right now, several of them moving into the cloud from a very enterprise, traditional manufacturing mindset. So it's a lot of fun to talk to these different divisions and business groups on how to use the cloud in manufacturing, through healthcare, IoT. And so some of what I'm going to talk about today is introduce that cloud journey. Where did 3M start with the cloud? What is it doing today? Where do we need to go? What are some of the organizational security paradigms and struggles that the organization has with security and the security has with the organization? And finally, how have we been moving security into the cloud, and how are we preparing for the 21st century? So with that, here are some of the cloud challenges that 3M has as a global presence company. As I mentioned, we're in 190 plus countries. That includes China, Russia, and a lot of the Middle East countries. We are traditionally a manufacturing and supply chain company. We do a lot of distributed marketing, manufacturing, and sales. One of the most common philosophies in our company is, what's old is new, so why change? If it's just as easy to swap out your manufacturing line to build new products, why can't you do the same thing with your IT infrastructure? In addition to that, we have folks who don't really understand the cloud. We've literally had people ask us, where on the network is AWS? It's a great conversation with those individuals to help show them what the power of the cloud is and how that can literally change what they're doing today. Finally, how do we move security into the cloud from a company that needs to protect airplanes, manufacturing plants, business offices, supply chain, distribution, and sell points, in addition to your traditional IT infrastructure? So to go into a little bit of 3M's cloud adoption story, it's truly a dichotomy. On the right, we have our Health Information Systems division, which in 2015 was facing a regulatory upheaval with a diagnosis change of ICD-10 adoption. This was going to overtax their existing infrastructure in a distributed network of data centers. The data centers wanted 18 months in order to provide appropriate levels of hardware to handle the surge that was going to happen over the first quarter of 2016. They wanted a lot of money to do that overhaul. So they started looking at AWS. And what they saw is they could do more with less. And so they went all in on AWS. Through 2016, they started migrating all of their production workloads. They're a little bit over 95% of all their workloads today are now operating on AWS. And so there was a lot of, everything's fine, everything's on fire, we're going to get in, get our production stuff going, and we'll work on doing the best practice exercises later. They're still working on that a little bit. There's still a little bit of fire as new markets go and new pressures get put on them. Conversely, on the corporate side, they're very much like my friend here watching the tsunami come in, thinking that their umbrella is going to be sufficient to handle their current infrastructure is going to handle their cloud requirements. They want to know, how do they put their very old, very deprecated virtual machines into the cloud? How do they build that perimeter defense for the cloud? How do they make sure that the traditional archetypes of access management and incident response occur inside the cloud? And it's been a lot of fun as the cloud security architect to not only help them understand what needs to change, but how does the cloud actually work, and how their traditional paradigms don't really work out that well. But in addition to that, it's not just with 3M. In a recent survey of public cloud adoption, the top 2 challenges for an organization moving into the cloud are security, governance, and compliance. Now, how many of you have seen, used, or spoken about this picture when you're discussing enterprise architecture? Probably everybody here. Everybody loves the moat. Everybody loves the castle walls. Putting your soldiers on top to watch everything inside and out. Well, that works great if you have a physical location where all your physical stuff is at. But what happens when you look up? What happens when you start seeing all of your things go to those clouds? You're not keeping those clouds inside your wonderful, beautiful castle on this beautiful lake. They're going. And if you're not going with them, other people are going to start watching your cloud, and they're going to start taking your stuff. The other problem is, in most organizations I've talked to, security is a 4-letter word. Why? Nobody likes endpoint management. Nobody likes having their computer slow down. Nobody likes having to do risk assessments. Nobody likes doing static code analysis, dynamic code analysis, pen tests, and about 300 other things that security is requiring teams to go through in order to go to production. Security's favorite word is no. No, you can't do that. No, you have to do this other way. No, you can't innovate. Which drives the business to see us as impediments, as gatekeepers. We don't enable the business. We're preventing the business from happening. So how have we at 3M gone about solving this problem and making security be an enabler? How does security drive the business? And how do we succeed together? First and foremost, we have to rethink the way we do security. Traditionally, security is on an ivory tower. We send mandates and we expect the business to comply. 99% of the time, the business is going around the ivory tower and figuring out their own way to do things. In the cloud, security needs to become a service. We need to look at API-driven solutions. We need to secure DevOps. That is not the same as DevSecOps. My buddy Bill Schmidt today totally backed me up on this one. Okay, we need to look at how do we develop what folks are doing in the cloud? How do we make sure that they're following the security controls and guidelines that we want them to have in place to prevent those clouds from running away with our data? How do we implement bumpers? Just like in the bowling alley here. Give them the space to move and do what they want, but make sure they can't get in the gutter. How do we get out of the way as security? Finally, as a great early 90s song once said, let's stop, collaborate, and listen to the business. Let's start discussing with them. What are their needs? What do they want from us? And how do we deliver those objectives and services to those individuals? The number thing we can do as security is empower the developers. We need to push a philosophy of you build it, you own it. Give them the security tools. Security doesn't need to run static code analysis on all the code in our company. We don't need to do dynamic code analysis. Teach the developers how to do that. Work with them to build that into their CI and CD pipelines. Let them fix it closer to where they're developing it. In addition to that, again, implement security as a service. Within your automated deployments, within your lunch and learns, within your business, start to provide a service to the business that they're going to rely on. Help them build better solutions, better products, better services so that they come to you instead of waiting to have to talk to you when they want to go to production. Finally, mentor the business. One of the biggest problems with going to the cloud is the business isn't brought along. The technologists are, your developers, your ops guys, all those guys are getting trained on the cloud, but not your marketing teams, not your accountants, not your executive management teams. So as from a security perspective, let's mentor that business. And what happens? We get better code with fewer bugs, therefore fewer vulnerabilities. We get faster deployments, so the teams start meeting or exceeding the deadlines that they've been given by the business. And finally, we get secure application code, which is what security wanted all along. Now to what I believe all companies need to be focusing on in the 20s, it's great to say that, is automation. The cloud is a great empower of business, and security is going to continue to fall behind if we don't start implementing automated services, solutions, and the way in which we do things. But to do that, first we need visibility. We need to be able to see what's happening inside of our cloud across as many accounts as our business wants to build, so that we understand what their patterns of usage are. Once we know what that visibility is, we can start to provide oversight. We can start to see the services they want to use. We can start to build patterns of practice, and we can start to communicate that out to the business to say, here's where we're seeing you're going wrong or putting the business at risk, and here's what we want you to do. Once we have that oversight, we can now build insights. This is where we start communicating back to the business. Here's where we start saying, here's your compliance to NIST, ISO, PCI, HIPAA, whatever control framework you want to use, you now have insights to say, here's where your organization meets based on the oversight that we've already put into place. Finally, once you have that insight, you can start to automate. You know where your business is lacking in knowledge, in implementation. Why not fix it automatically? As security, we all know the kill chain. The fastest way to prevent an attacker from compromising your system is to be able to respond faster. But if something happens in your system and that event has to go into a queue that gets worked by someone in your security operations center, and that happens to be at 3 a.m. on a weekday or on a weekend, it's probably going to take some time for that person to look it up, validate it, and take the remediation steps necessary to fix your environment. And in the cloud, that could be an infinite amount of time for that attacker to compromise and exfiltrate your data. If you're automating your responses because you know you should never have an S3 bucket public, then you don't need to worry about someone working a queue that got an event that a bucket was made public. Your automation took care of that for you in minutes rather than hours to days. If a developer decides to open an SSH or RDP security group open to the world because they're using the default launch wizard, your automation can immediately fix that. It can go out and change that to what your company mandated security group rules are. You don't have to worry about someone coming in on Monday to do that. And these are the things that we use, DivvyCloud, a few other products in this very floor to provide us with this visibility, oversight, insight, and automation. So with that, we can start to help the business. We can start to build better tools, better services that enable the security team to be the first people that our developers come to. So I was a part of our health information systems division prior to coming up to the corporate level, and we proved that. The developers hated coming to security. They hated talking to me because I would tell them no, because that was the policy. But once I started listening to them, I started talking to them and saying, hey, how do we fix this? What do you need us to be able to do? We started collaborating with them, and we started building these tools out. And now, they're the first ones that come to me to say, hey, we're thinking about doing this thing. How should we do this? And we start to build security from the ground up because we're enabling them to do their job better, faster, and within the control frame, because they know if they're doing our guardrails within our system, they're not going to have to worry about coming to talk to me because they already know that they're going to have this automation and our guardrails and our empowerment so that they don't have to build it themselves. They don't have to provide the capabilities and worry about what security is going to say. They already know what it is. And our automation will tell them when they deviate outside of that chosen norm. So with that, no security presentation is complete without the admission to secure all the things and a picture of a cat. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions that anybody might have. So the question is, what's the appropriate amount of time to enforce automation? And ultimately, it depends. So one of the things we do for automation is we enforce tagging. So we enforce things like, we want to know what application is deploying these resources. We want to know what data classification exists for those resources so that we know if it's trade secrets, if it's protected health information, we're applying the appropriate controls. So when you launch a resource that isn't tagged, we're going to immediately respond if it's not tagged correctly, because we don't want those resources to exist in our cloud that aren't tagged correctly. Now, there may be other situations like S3 buckets or RDS databases where you don't necessarily want to take immediate action, but we still want automation to exist. So we can actually alert the owners based on those tags that, hey, your resource is out of compliance, and if you don't do something in the next 1, 3, 4 hours, then we are going to take an action. We're going to apply a resource-based policy that prevents people from pulling data out of that resource. You can still put data in, but you're not getting it out until you fix that compliance issue. This way, we ensure that, again, we're giving the teams the flexibility and the power to deploy their resources, but we're going to ensure that they're compliant with what we want them to be able to do. Same thing with if we notice a configuration change on security group rules, like I mentioned earlier. If I have someone that wants to try and create a backdoor into our system, and all of a sudden I see NACLs and security group rules start changing outside of our defined networking schema, I can have my automation go in and fix it. And we've actually had people with public S3 buckets try 20 to 30 times to make it public, and it just never takes because our automation is constantly going back and keeping them from doing that to protect themselves. Now, we also go in and we fix it for them and send a nice email and then take their permissions away, but that's all automated. I don't care if they're doing it at 2 in the afternoon or 2 in the morning. It's happening. Eventually, yeah. So as people understand that they're not able to do certain things, they start to change their behavior. They start to look at, well, if I can't follow this blog that says make this S3 bucket public, how am I supposed to do it? How am I supposed to get access to my resources so I can manage it? That's where we can get into the best practice. If you need SSH or RDP, here are the bastion hosts. Here's how you use SSM instead of SSH or RDP. Here's how you do your configuration as a part of your code pipeline, so you don't even have to worry about that. Here's how you do immutable architecture, so you don't have to worry about patching in place. So there's a lot of ways in which we can take that behavior change and shift it into our cultural norms that we want these folks to have. Well, it takes a culture change. And so his question was, how do you staff your security organization to be a culture of change versus a culture of no? And it's a change. I would argue that I'm not a traditional security guy. But I think it comes from asking how. How do we help the business? How do we give them what they need without us having to have this manual process that we have to put into place, without having to have all of this architecture, with truly understanding the cloud? And I think that comes with bringing in folks who understand what the cloud actually means to a business. And that's not just from a security perspective, but from a potential business perspective. How awesome can this company be because they're using the cloud to enable their business to do the best things that they can possibly do? Any other questions? Comments, haikus? It's 6 o'clock. Well, it's 6:30 almost. There's got to be beer around here somewhere.
Surely.
See, he found it. All right, I think we're good.
I think you did it. Thanks,
Thank you
guys. Thanks so much. And Jason, thank you very much.